A quiet hero in a small-town diner. The morning sun crept over the cracked sidewalks of Clinton, Ohio, casting a soft glow on Maple Street. Tucked between a faded barbershop and an empty lot where a hardware store once stood, Rosie's Diner was a local relic. Its neon sign buzzed faintly, but nobody cared. People didn't come for the decor, they came for the comfort of familiarity, the smell of frying bacon, and the promise of a warm meal. Inside, the booths were patched with duct tape, the walls lined with yellowed clippings of high school baseball teams from the 80s, and a slightly tilted American flag hung by the counter. It wasn't much, but it was home. Every Sunday at 8 a.m., Walter Thompson pushed through the diner's glass door. No fanfare, just a nod to anyone who glanced his way and a quiet morning, Rosie. The Rosie had sold the place a decade ago. Walter, 78, always claimed the same booth, second from the window, where the light was soft but he could still be left alone. He wore an old army jacket, the olive green kind from the Vietnam era, frayed at the cuffs but still holding its shape. A faded patch on the back read, 101st Airborne. Some thought he wore it to stand out. The truth was, it was the only thing that still fit his soul. He'd sit, nudge the sugar shaker out of habit, and wait for his order, black coffee, no frills, and a slice of pecan pie, edges just a tad crispy. Walter didn't talk much. His eyes, sharp despite his years, told you he'd seen enough to know when to speak and when to stay quiet. Arthritis slowed his steps, but his posture was still that of a soldier, back straight, hands steady. The regulars respected his space, and the waitresses knew not to hover. If a curious kid asked about his jacket, he'd share a brief tale, always making someone else the hero. But on this particular Sunday, something felt off. Jake Russo, the 28-year-old son of the diner's current owner, watched from the kitchen. He liked Walter, who'd once told him, "Son, if your pecan pie was a woman, I'd propose." They'd laughed hard over that. The diner was quiet that morning, a couple flipping through the Sunday paper, a dad wiping syrup off his kid's chin, an older woman nursing her oatmeal. Just another day. Walter took a bite of his pie, leaned back, and for a moment, he wasn't in Clinton. He was somewhere else, maybe decades ago. Then the door slammed open, loud enough to rattle the silverware. 3 young men strutted in, mid-20s, all bravado and sneakers. Their laughter filled the room like a storm cloud. One had a Bluetooth speaker blasting music nobody wanted. Jake frowned from the kitchen. The trio shouted about old-timers taking up space, and one pointed at Walter. The air shifted. Nobody spoke, but every eye darted toward the scene, waiting. The loudest of the 3, Ethan Carter, wore a backward cap and a smirk that screamed trouble. Beside him was Caleb Reed, lanky and restless, always bouncing on his toes. The third, Marcus Tate, hid behind sunglasses, acting detached but clearly in on it. Ethan scanned the diner like he owned it, his gaze locking on Walter. "Yo, check out Grandpa Rambo over here," he called, pointing at Walter's booth. Caleb snickered. "Bet he thinks this place still takes war bonds." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the diner, but most folks stared at their plates, hoping the storm would pass. Walter didn't flinch. He sipped his coffee, hands steady. Jake's jaw tightened in the kitchen, but he held back, watching. Ethan sauntered over, leaning on Walter's table. "Hey, Pops, what's with the costume? You auditioning for a war movie?" Caleb chimed in. "Tell us a story, old man. You take down commies with a butter knife?" Marcus lingered by the jukebox, scrolling his phone, playing innocent. Walter looked up, his eyes calm but piercing. "You boys got nothing better to do?" he asked, voice low but firm. Ethan grinned, undeterred. "Just talking freedom of speech, right, soldier?" Jake had had enough. He wiped his hands, pushed through the kitchen door, and stood by the counter, silent but ready. The waitress, Clara, a tough 60-something with a no-nonsense streak, shot him a glance. Walter set down his fork. "You get your laughs picking on old folks?" he asked, still holding Ethan's gaze. "Nah," Ethan said, chuckling. "Just wondering why you're still rocking that dusty jacket like it's a trophy." A man in a nearby booth muttered, "It is a trophy, idiot." Ethan spun around. "What was that?" No one answered. Jake stepped closer, his voice steady. "That's enough." Ethan turned. "Who are you, his bodyguard?" Jake didn't blink. "Do you know who this man is?" Ethan faltered, just for a second. Jake looked at Walter, who hadn't moved. The diner went quiet, every fork still. Ethan scoffed, trying to regain control. "What, he's some war hero?" Jake didn't answer. He let the silence do the talking. Then a voice broke through an older man at a corner table, setting down his paper. That man saved my brother in Vietnam. Carried him 3 miles through a jungle after a grenade took his leg. A woman at the counter turned. He saved my uncle, too. Dragged him out of a burning chopper. Even Clara stepped forward. You boys have no clue who you're messing with. Ethan's smirk faded. Caleb shifted, uneasy. Marcus lowered his phone. The room wasn't with them anymore. Walter exhaled, folding his napkin. He looked at Ethan. You ever been shot at, son? Ever held a friend while he bled out, calling for his mom? Ethan didn't answer. Didn't think so, Walter said. Maybe you should hush before you make a bigger fool of yourself. Caleb leaned in, still trying to save face. Man, you think just 'cause you fought in some war, we owe you something? Jake stepped closer. He doesn't ask for anything, but you owe him more than you'll ever know. A woman in her 70s, wearing a bright red scarf, spoke from a corner booth. You punks think coming back from Vietnam was a party? He came home to hate people spitting on him, doors slammed in his face. He fought one war overseas, then another right here. Jake added, have you ever been turned away from a job because of the uniform you wore? Ever had to drink from a different fountain after risking your life for folks who wouldn't walk beside you? Ethan looked away, his bravado crumbling. Caleb stepped back. Marcus finally spoke, his voice softer. All right, he's a vet. He went through stuff. Doesn't mean he gets a free pass to act like he owns the place. Walter's voice cut through, calm but firm. I never asked for anything. I just came for my pie, same as every Sunday for 20 years. If my being here makes you feel small, that's your problem, not mine. Jake crossed his arms. You wanted attention. Now you've got it. And you don't know what to do with it. A man with crutches stood, his voice shaking. Walter pulled me out of a collapsed bunker in Da Nang. I was 20. He could have saved himself, but he came back for me. So yeah, he's earned some respect. The silence was heavy now. Ethan's eyes darted around, finding no allies. Walter pushed his plate aside. I don't wear this jacket for attention, he said, brushing a crumb off the sleeve. I wear it for the men who never came home to take theirs off. But there was more to his story, something even the regulars didn't know, something that would change everything. Jake pulled a chair beside Walter's booth, not sitting, just standing guard. There's something else you need to hear, he said, looking at the 3 young men. Walter sighed, reluctant. He didn't want this told, but Jake pressed on. He had a wife. Her name was Evelyn. She used to come here with him, years back. Always wore a silver necklace, even though it was missing a charm. She said Walter gave it to her before he shipped out. Walter's hands lay flat on the table, his eyes fixed on his cold coffee. She waited for him through 2 tours, Jake continued. Worked double shifts, saved every dime for a crib, thinking they'd start a family. But Evelyn died the day before Walter got home, hit by a drunk driver on Route 42. He didn't know until he stepped off the bus and a neighbor told him. The diner went still. Walter spoke, barely above a whisper. We'd picked a name for the baby. Boy or girl, it'd be Riley. Just wanted them healthy. He swallowed hard. I missed her funeral by 2 hours. Flight delays out of Saigon. Never got to say goodbye. Ethan blinked fast, his jaw slack. Caleb stared at the floor. Marcus rubbed his mouth, sunglasses hiding his eyes. Clara brought Walter a fresh coffee, setting it down gently and squeezing his shoulder. Jake faced the trio. So when you mock that jacket, when you laugh at him, you're spitting on a man who's lost more than you'll ever understand. Ethan's voice cracked. I didn't know, man. Walter gave a tired smile. You didn't want to. The man with crutches spoke again. You didn't know because you never asked. That's the problem. You assume, you mock, but you don't listen. The woman in the red scarf added, You're lucky you grew up in a world Walter helped make safer for you to act like fools. Ethan shifted, his voice low. I'm sorry. I mean it. Walter studied him, searching for sincerity. Don't apologize just to get out of this. Say, if you'll carry it with you. Ethan nodded slowly. Caleb mumbled, We didn't know your story. That's no excuse, but still. Marcus added, We were just being dumb. Walter's hand rested on his coffee cup. Being dumb's one thing. Choosing to stay that way's another. The diner softened. A teenage girl, maybe 16, in a flannel shirt, approached with a notebook. Mr. Thompson, can you write your name? I want to remember it. Walter took the pen, writing, Walter Thompson, Infantry, 101st Airborne. She clutched the notebook like a treasure and sat back down. The room felt lighter, but Walter had one last thing to say, not for the boys who'd left, but for everyone still there. He sipped his coffee, then spoke, his voice carrying across the diner. When I came home in '73, I didn't expect a parade. I just wanted peace, a job, a family. But peace was hard-won. I wore this jacket because it was all I had left. And every time I walked into a store or sat on a bus, someone looked at me like I didn't belong. Sometimes they said things. Sometimes they crossed the street. But the worst was the silence when folks decided I wasn't worth a word. Heads nodded, faces tightened. You can't force respect, he said. You live in a way that demands it, not with fists, but with truth. Those boys were just noise. I've heard louder, faced worse. What hurts is how easy it is for folks to stay quiet when they see wrong. Clara's eyes glistened. We should have spoken up sooner. Walter shook his head. I don't come here to scold. I come for the pie. But maybe quiet's not always what we need. He turned to the younger faces, the girl with the notebook, a few college kids. You don't need a war to be brave. Sometimes it's just speaking up when someone's being torn down, especially if it's not you. The girl nodded, scribbling in her notebook. And one day, Walter added, when you see someone mocked for who they are, you'll remember this morning. Cruelty's small when truth steps in. He brushed his hands. No, I'd like to finish my pie. Quiet laughter broke the tension. By noon, word of the morning spread. A blurry photo of Walter in his booth, Jake beside him, hit social media with a caption, "This man shut down 3 bullies without raising his voice." It spread fast, shared in barbershops, church groups, and coffee shops. Ethan faced the fallout. His boss mentioned it. His sister texted, "Fix this." That night, he sat in his car, notifications piling up, regrets sinking in. He thought about returning to Rosie's, maybe with an apology letter. The next Sunday, Walter's booth was ready, a single daisy and a glass on the table. Clara grinned. Don't expect flowers every week. But the diner was different now. People nodded, spoke, and asked. A man with his son approached. Mr. Thompson, my kid saw the video online. I used it to teach him about standing upright. Walter smiled at the boy. You treat folks well? The boy nodded. Keep at it. Trying's the point. Later, a local high school invited Walter to speak at their Veterans Day assembly. He hesitated. Crowds weren't his thing, but a note from a student, Sarah, with messages from her class, changed his mind. He walked into the auditorium, jacket pressed, steps slow but sure. The students quieted, not out of fear, but respect. At the mic, he said, I don't have much to say, but it's worth hearing. He spoke of loss, of coming home to a world that didn't always welcome him, of carrying grief without breaking. You don't need a uniform to serve, he told them. Just pay attention. Speak up when it's easier to stay quiet. The room stood, clapping not for show, but for truth. Across the street, Ethan watched from a bus stop. He waved, no swagger, just a gesture. Walter nodded. Jake, driving Walter home, said, Never seen a room so quiet. Walter replied, They were listening. Jake smiled. Feels like something stuck. Walter looked out the window. That's the hope. From that day, Walter's booth was never empty. People came, listened, and shared. His words became a quiet force, not because he shouted, but because he lived them. Clinton wasn't the same. Respect wasn't just a word, it was a choice. What do you think about Walter's story? How would you handle a situation like this, facing disrespect or witnessing injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below, especially on the role of standing up to cruelty and violence in everyday life. Let's hear your perspective.